Hey everybody, hi, it's Becky from PowerToolsWithThread.com. That's my blog. Are you ready to make designs by JuJu's Christmas tree skirt? Y'all, this thing is phenomenal. It is an amazing piece of art, heirloom quality. It's stitched out gorgeous. Everything was just so incredibly beautiful. Let me take the camera off and show you what this is all about. This is the 6x10 tree skirt, and it has 3 different panel sections. So you have your inner wedge, you have your middle part, and you have an outer edge. And all pieces are backed with Pellon's SF 101, Shape Flex 101. You really want to do that because you've got heavy satin stitching throughout most of this project, and the SF101 will prevent all the puckering from happening. And look at the ice cream shop. We've got a gingerbread house. We have a church, pet shop, a yarn store, a quilt shop, milk and cookies. Oh my goodness, you guys. It is just the most incredible piece of art. A pie shop. We have a lighthouse. I did put metallic threads in throughout this. You will see metallic threads in mine. It's that King Star from Designs and Machine Embroidery, and it's stitched out beautifully. We have a post office, a Christmas tree lot. Isn't it just lovely? And throughout we've got Santa, he's got presents dropping. And then we have all the reindeer with Rudolph leading the way. Just absolutely gorgeous. I made some notes along the way as I was making this to talk to you about that will give you some help when it comes time for you to start making the quilt. I have created a Christmas tree skirt block tracker, and I will put that on my blog, PowerToolsWithThread.com. And you will be able to then kind of keep track of how many of each block you've made and which block you've made. Let me show you. I have blocks 1 through 8 and then multiples of 9. And I check them off as I got them stitched. Here's your middle blocks, okay? And here's your outer blocks, red, green, red, green. I made my presents different colors on these outer blocks and check them off as I got them done, and then multiples of 1 and multiples of 2. So that just kind of kept me on track so that I knew exactly how many more I had to go for that particular stitch out. If you're using a multi-needle, it's just a matter of putting another piece of stabilizer in the hoop and off you go, and then checking it off and checking it off, because you will have already programmed the multi-needle and told it which threads to use on which color and saved it and all that, so you can come back to it the next day. And it just makes life a whole lot easier. You multi-needle users, if you haven't dusted it off in a while, you're definitely going to want to do that. Having a multi-needle makes this a much quicker stitch out for sure. This is a great big project, okay? There are 45 hoopings in this. And while some of them are the same, where you have multiples of the inner wedges, you've got multiples of the outer pieces, they take upwards of an hour each just to stitch out. And it's a lot. And so you will definitely need to pace yourself and get yourself into a rhythm of getting a block a day or 2 a day, you know, a hooping or 2 hoopings a day to get it all done. And then it's going to take another day for finishing to get it all together, to stitch everything together. And throughout all of the stitching and whatnot, you'll see I've got different shirts on because it took different days to be able to do this. If you have not used metallics, this is a fabulous project to do and to use metallic threads. They just sparkle so pretty all throughout this. And again, dimes, King Star metallic. They've got a Christmas quartet. I will link to that below, and you'll absolutely love using those threads. I cut my fabric in strips. I actually took the width, I did a printout from Embrilliance. You can use any embroidery software to print out your piece, and you're going to want to print that out. And I just put it in strips and, you know, as wide, like a regular folded width of fabric, laid it on there, cut it out, and left a little bit on each side. I was able to really conserve fabric that way and get it so that I could get 4 to 5 middle blocks on a single width of fabric, and same for the inner blocks and the outer ones. I flipped the pattern back and forth and rotated it in the machine so that I could just use and not waste any wedges of fabric that way. It worked out really, really well. The priority should be to conserve fabric. If you are going to be doing this in an ombre, I did see a sample that was done in an ombre fabric, and that's going to take 2 to 3 times the amount of fabric that you would normally use if you were not using an ombre. So take that into consideration. The fabric requirements that they talk about are not for ombre. Okay, you waste an enormous amount of fabric if you're going to be using ombre. So be sure to just kind of think about that. Buy 2 to 3 times what you need, because you can't easily do the multiples down. It just doesn't work like that. You're going to go through quite a bit. In a lot of these projects, you can use the trimmer by George to trim away the batting after it's all said and done and you're ready to take it out of the hoop. In this particular project, you cannot do that. The way it has been digitized is the batting tack down line is actually about 1/8 of an inch more narrow than the fabric tack down line. So you will need to remove the hoop from the machine, trim away the batting with scissors, and then put your fabric on it, put it back in the machine. I did use the trimmer by George, and you'll see that here at the end when I'm trimming up my blocks. But I did use the trimmer by George to get rid of the excess stabilizer that you are supposed to do. On blocks where you might use light fabrics, for instance, in the yarn store, the white puffy around the yarn, the knitted hat on top of the yarn store. That's just adorable, you guys. Oh, who thinks of this, Julie? It's gorgeous. So around here, you may want to double up your fabrics on lighter fabrics if your background fabric will show through. So look at it first, and if you could, like I could see these little gray dots of this Blossom background fabric. This is Blossom by Christopher Thompson for Riley Blake. I'll put a link to all of the fabrics and everything that I used below the video. And if you use a lighter fabric and you can see through it, you might want to double those up, okay? I did use the ScanNCut to cut out some blocks. I found after several blocks, about 6 or so, that it was just as easy just to trim them out in the hoop. There's not a lot of intricate little cuts where you would want to use a cutting machine. You certainly can if you want to, and I'll show you how to do that to create the SVG files and whatnot to do that, but you don't have to. Most of these shapes are large enough with rounded edges or something, or big cuts, that they're fairly simple to trim away in the hoop. So that's not real labor intensive on this particular project. I will take you through my process as I made all of these. I did the entire thing on the multi-needle. I think you're really going to enjoy it. I want to thank Designs by JuJu. This was so much fun. It took me about a week, 10 days. It took me about 10 days of non-stop sewing. I was doing anywhere between 2 and 4 a day, and there's 45, so yeah, you'll be busy, okay? All right, you guys, let's get to it. Getting ready to stitch out the third wedge of the inner circle on the Designs by JuJu Christmas tree skirt. This is Embrilliance Essentials, and I'm going to pull in the block itself into Embrilliance because I want to inspect it, take a look at it, and know what I can expect when I'm stitching. I'm just going to come here to my computer and grab it and bring it over and drop it into Embrilliance. And then I'm going to highlight it over here in the Objects panel, and I want to rotate it 90 degrees That's the way my machine is rotating it by default, so I'm just going to do it like that too, so I'm familiar with how it looks. And I just rolled my mouse wheel in to make it a little bit bigger. If I come over here to the Objects panel, I'm going to click the plus sign, and I'm going to click off the design anywhere on the main screen, and that unhighlights them all. And if I wanted to, I could click the preferred button down here for the threads because it defaulted to Brother Embroidery, but I'm just going to click preferred and it's going to switch to my Isacord poly. So the first stitch is the placement line for the batting. I want you to take a look at this right here. So this is the placement line for the batting. There's the tack down for the batting, and then look at this one. That's the tack down for the fabric. And note that there is a space in there for that. This means if you have a trimmer by George, you're not going to be able to use that on this particular project because the fabric is outside of the trim line for the batting. In most of these projects from Designs by JuJu, the tack down for the batting and the tack down for the fabric are on top of each other. So then you can use that trimmer by George to trim away the batting after you remove it from the hoop. But because it's digitized like this, you're going to have to trim the batting while it is in the hoop. So if we keep going, this is the present that's sticking out of his little bag. And then here is the present bag itself. Here are the skids for the sleigh, and I'm probably going to use a gold metallic on that. This is a really good time to bring out your metallic threads. I am using Kingstar from Designs and Machine Embroidery. I'll link to it below. It's a phenomenal metallic thread, no kinks, no breaks. It really does a great job. So let's go through this. Okay. There is part of the reins that he's holding. There is his little hat and his suit. There's his face. There's his beard. There's the hat, band, and the pom-pom. There's the sleigh, the body of the sleigh. There's detail stitching for the sleigh. There's the bow on the present. There's his little eye. And then there are blue stars. I'm using a Kingstar metallic blue for that. And then there are our snowflakes and swirls and whatnot. So, okay, there's no applique on this particular block. It's all embroidery. And now I have a really good idea when I'm looking at the preview on my embroidery machine exactly what it is that I want to do for the thread colors. One of the things I found out, so I have the Brother PR 1055X, the Entrepreneur Pro 10 needle. And in the Embrilliance menu up here, there is a utility that when you scroll down, it says Send to Solaris XP1. That's the Baby Lock Solaris and the Brother Luminaire. I don't have my Luminaire turned on right now, but the Luminaire and the Brother PR 1055 use the same wireless technology. So I'm just going to click this and I'll just call it block 3 and click OK. Now it's going to send an error. It says error sending file. Please try again. I'm going to tell it OK, but I just heard the machine chime. And that design is over there at the PR 1055 right now. So even though it doesn't say you can do that, you definitely can do that. I've been very successful at that so far. So you can send designs wirelessly in Embrilliance to the Brother PR 1055. Okay, now that I've gone all through this, I'm going to actually print out the stitches page from the Embrilliance. I don't need to print this out. I know where this is going to stitch because it has the die lines for me. But I do want to print out the second page, which gives me all the stitches and color changes, and that way I can write next to each one what it is so that I have a little roadmap when I'm getting ready to go through and assign thread colors. So I'm coming up to the File menu, and I'm going to come here to Print Preview. You can see it's page 1. I'm going to go, I just want to make sure. Yep. So page 2 gives me all of the thread changes, and that's good. I'm going to hit the print icon, and I'm going to go right here and click Pages and tell it from 2 to 2, because that's all I really need right now. And then I'm going to write what each one of these are, and that way I can easily assign thread colors when I'm at the machine. I've already sent it over there, and I'm ready to get stitching. The way I'm measuring and cutting my fabrics is I just did a printout of one middle block, and I made sure I left a 1/2 inch all the way around the outside of the block. And then I'm just laying the block on my fabric, and I'm giving it about 1 inch out here, and I'll give it about 1 inch out here. And it's folded in half, it's fine. I'm gonna measure 1 inch away, and then I'll just make a cut. Make sure it's straight, so I get a straight edge. Not that it matters, because it's all going to be trimmed away. So now I know I have more than enough fabric to stitch out my pieces. Now for the SF101, this SF101 on this bolt is 20 inches wide. So I'm going to cut out the same length as this without taking into consideration the selvages, because I don't need the selvages, so I'm just going to leave them on. I just need one length of this because I'm going to cut this in half. And half of a width of this is plenty for me to run it down the center of the fabric, and then the fabric will be fully backed and everything will be fine. I've got about an extra inch of selvage down here that I don't need, so I'm going to back it up about 1 inch. Straighten this up, and I'm just going to cut it. So you don't have to get crazy with your measuring. It can be very simple just to eyeball these. And I'm just going to press this in half so I have a line. Okay, and then put the fold on a line and then just cut up the line. Great. Okay. So that's how quick and easy it is to cut your fabric and your SF101. Now I'm going to take this over to the ironing board, and from center fold, I'm just going to lay these out like this, and they will be long enough to cover the entire area for the embroidery. See? That's perfect. Quick and easy. No math. Okay, I'm over here at the machine, and I sent the design over wirelessly. I have got my dime magnetic hoop, and this uses the A frame. It has the A up here in the corner, and then you have to slide it over on this side 1 notch, and it'll kind of click in, and then it fits right there. I just overlap stabilizer scraps. This is 3 or 4 of them together. It's 3, it looks like, on this one. And this is a great use of scraps because it's going to be hidden inside of the project anyway. So, and this is a no-show poly mesh. So to get the design, I'm going to come over here and touch the wireless icon. And there it is right there. And it's going to tell you that it's too large for the extra large embroidery frame, and that's because of the way it is aligned on the icon, and so it wants you to turn it 90 degrees. Now that I've gone through it on the computer screen and in Brilliance, I can just hit set because I know what I'm looking at now, and I'm going to go edit end. On this screen I can resize, rotate, and everything. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to hit edit end. And now I want to go to these 3 spools right here. I'm going to set the colors. So I'm going to touch that. In this column right here, this is the number of color stops that are in the design itself. And it starts with number 1 and goes all the way down to, how many? I think we have like 17. Yeah, there's 17. And then here we have 1 through 5, and then 6 through 10. And these are the assigned to the cones on the back of the machine, to the spools. And then this is a hand to stop, so it doesn't, it'll stop in the middle of the design when I want it to. This is no stitch, and then the OK button. So right here, it tells you we have 1 through 17 color stops, and the first one is that placement line for the batting. And I want that to be color number 6, which is a white. So you can see here, it changed from 1 to 6 on this screen. So I'm going to touch this one. Let me get rid of that hand. I don't want that on there right there. Now I'm going to go to the next one, and the way this machine thinks, it's a little bit backwards. You would think it would be stitch the line and then stop, so you would put the hand at the end of after it stitches. No, that's not how it works. It stops and then it will stitch. So instead of having the hand at the end of the first stitch, the hand actually goes up before the second stitch. So I'm going to put the hand up, and that's going to tell it to stop before it stitches the next one. And I'm going to have that be number 6 as well. And that is my batting tack down line. And I'm going to go to the third one. I can tell here I'm on number 3. I want it to stop so I can trim the batting away and put the fabric down. And I want that to be color number 6 as well. That's white. Okay, now I'm ready to go through. After I have done that, putting the fabric on, and it tacks that down, the machine is going to do everything else all by itself. This is why I love the multi-needle for these big projects. So there is the package. I'm going to have that be color number 7. And there is the bag. That's color number 2, spool number 2. And then that last stitch is number 10. And I tell it OK. And then I touch embroidery. And it says it's going to take 41 minutes to stitch out. It's 22,000 stitches. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK. I'm all done. I'm going to tell it OK. Embroidery, lock, and go. So it is stitching out the placement line for the batting. So this is kind of on a wedge. This doesn't matter because it's going to be cut off. And I'm just laying this this is a scrap of batting. I'm just laying it over the top, making sure I've got my stitch line all covered. I'm going to hit lock and go. And it's going to run it around twice. Now this is the quilting table that goes with this machine. It's an add-on, an accessory. I really like it because when I'm doing this kind of work, I like to have this as the firm surface to hold my project so I won't pop it out of the hoop or have it shift anywhere or anything. I'm trying to keep my arm out of the way for y'all. I'm going to take some paper tape, and what I'm going to do is, since this was cut from the last wedge, okay, so I'm going to just put this right up to that red line right there that I drew in the back, so I know I have enough to trim it for the seam allowance. Top, bottom, side to side, I am good. And I'm just going to tape it to the stabilizer. So this is the way I'm conserving fabric. I'm going to get my wedge. I'm only going to waste like ½ an inch of fabric, if that, per wedge, ¼ of an inch maybe. Okay, so this is good. I'm all ready to go. So I'm going to hit lock and go. Okay, and the rest of it is just going to stitch itself. All done. Doesn't need any more intervention from me at all. Here's the little present. with one. I've kind of gotten into a rhythm where I will take it out and go ahead and hoop another piece right away, stabilizer, before I cut that out. And trim the one that just finished so that the fabric for the next one is ready to go. And because I already pre-cut all my batting, I have a stack ready. You'll notice I didn't change the thread colors because I'm stitching all of the outer pieces with the red present first. I'm doing red, green, red, green. I'm making little notches in the bottom of the big curve to, but not through, the seam lines so that the fabric has somewhere to go when it is turned. Trim the batting. Mark a line that's 3/4 of an inch away from the top of the piece on the stabilizer, and that's the placement line for my fabric. Use 2 little pieces of tape to tape the fabric in place and put it back in the machine. Finish trimming up my block. Mark on the back the number of the block. That one was 1-5, so this one will be 1-7. And mark it off on my chart. That's my workflow. Okay, it's all done. Let's see how it looks. Oh, it turned out adorable. Oh my goodness, that's cute. Look at that. All right, one down and I don't know, 2 million to go. I wanted to show you how to use Embroidery Essentials to make SVG cut files so you can pre-cut your applique pieces if you would like. I apologize for the camera angle on this. My audio record on my laptop is giving me fits right now, so I'm making do. When you have your design open, you would come over to the Objects panel and just click the plus sign to open up all of the elements inside of the design. As I mentioned when we went through a block at the beginning of the video, your first stitch is your batting placement line, the second stitch is the batting tack down, and the third stitch is the fabric tack down. What you are looking for are placement stitches throughout the design for the rest of the applique. And there is the placement line for the Milk and Cookie shop right there. And to turn that into an SVG cut file, you will come down to the properties box, and on the color tab you'll just click the color chip and it opens up a thread dialog box, and you have a tab for color and a tab for applique. You click the tab for applique, and where it says style not applique, you want to hit the drop down arrow and choose applique position. And then right here it says cutting, and an inflate of 1.0 millimeters is perfect and requires very little additional trimming. It fits perfect inside that line, and just click save. Inside of my DBJJ Christmas tree skirt folder, I created a new folder called SVG files, and I'm going to save it in block 4 cookies, and I'm just going to highlight this and I'm going to call it shop and hit enter for save. It has a DPI, dots per inch of 96. That's a default. That's fine. We don't need to worry about that. I'm going to click OK and click OK. And that's it. So then I'm going to go on through the design. Here is the tack down line for the shop. Here is the placement line for the cookie. I'm going to click the color chip, go to Applique, make sure it's at Applique position, click Save, and call it Cookie. And OK, and OK. And then I'm going to keep going down. There's the tack down line for the cookie. There is the placement line for the door. Click the color chip, Applique, Save, name it Door, hit Save, hit OK. See, this just takes a minute when you get the hang of this. There's your tack down for the door, and here's your placement line for the sign. I'm going to click the color chip, go to Applique, make sure I'm on Applique position, click Save, give it a name, Sign, and hit Save and OK and OK. And you can go through the rest of the design, but there are no other applique pieces. Everything else is satin stitching. So I'm all finished with this here. Now I'm going to go out and open my browser, and I'm in the Canvas workspace. You can upload these SVG files to any place where your cutting machine, you might have files. They all have their own clouds. I'm going to click New for a new mat. Up here on this top row menu, there is an icon for SVG. I'm going to click that. I'm going to choose a file. I'm going to go to Block 4 Cookies and get the cookie and click Open and OK. And these all load right up here in this upper corner, so I'm going to grab it and move it down approximately where I'm going to put the fabric on the mat. Go back to SVG, choose a file. Now these look like Microsoft Edge icons. That's okay, they definitely are SVG files. It even says Microsoft Edge HTML document. That's because the SVG file format is not native to Windows, and it doesn't really know what to do with it or what icon to do. So it just assigned something arbitrarily. I'm going to click Open, but you can see here it says door.svg. If this was not an SVG file, you'd get an error message. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to move the door right over here, and SVG, choose File, Shop, Open, OK. Grab it and move it down here. SVG, choose File, Sign, Open, and OK. And there we go. That's it. That's all of my applique pieces that I'm going to pre-cut. And now I am going to click this up here in the project title, and I'm going to call it Cookies, and come over to the project tab, and there's an inbox with a plus sign. I'm going to click that, and it's going to save as Cookies. I'm going to tell it OK, and now I'm going to download it, and I'm going to download to the ScanNCut transfer to my machine. It says ScanNCut transfer is ready, and I'm going to click Close. And that's it. I'm ready to go cut out my pieces. I want to show you how I prep my fabrics for the applique. I have cut all of my pieces out according to how big they need to be for that particular applique piece. And this is Heat and Bond Light. And I kind of do this unorthodox, but it really works. It's pretty quick and easy. It works really well. So this is the paper side down and the adhesive side up. And I'm going to put the fabric pretty side up on the Heat and Bond. And I have not got anything drawn on the paper because I'm cutting these out with the cutting machine. So I have got the fabric placed with just a tiny bit of fabric on the outside of the Heat and Bond on the edges, so that it completely covers the Heat and Bond. And then I place my fabrics so that they go over each other just a tiny bit as well, so that there's no gaps of Heat and Bond between the fabric pieces. I can't see any on there. And then I'm going to do this one the same here. I'll flip this around because of the little edge. So this is good. This is ready to go. I'm just going to take my iron and I'm just going to very carefully, it's not a full press because I don't want to get my iron up near the heat and bond, but I'm just tacking the fabric to the heat and bond now. So I'm not touching the heat and bond with the iron. I'm only touching the fabric. Then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to trim just a couple of threads into it. You know, there's just a tiny, tiny bit of thread, okay? And what this is going to do is make sure there's no heat and bond sticking out either side of anywhere around the edges of the fabric. So I'm just going to trim this off. So see, these are my only cuts I need to make on this. Okay, so I'm done with that. And now I've got a little bit extra heat and bond right here that didn't get cut away. I don't want to see any heat and bond on the pretty side. Okay. And now I'm really going to iron it down really well. And I'm going to make sure to get the corners and all of that. You want to adhere this so that when you peel off the paper, it looks kind of glassy. And you know you have it right. If it's stringy, it's not going to hold very well and it won't work. You want to make the heat and bond to be part of the fabric and really adhere to the fibers. And now I'm going to do the front side just to double check and be sure. Now I don't even have to cut these apart. I'm just going to let it cool for a second. It's pretty hot. And then you can just peel away the one piece and the pieces come apart because they're already cut. See that? It just works so easy. You don't have to measure. You don't have to individually cut anything. It just works super easy. There we go. Okay, it's all done. That's how quick it is to just do heat and bond on all of your pieces all at one time. Okay, I'm over here at my ScanNCut. I've got my little pieces ready to cut out, and I'm just going to touch this, and it says the carriage will move to the initial position, and I'll tell it okay. The first thing I want to do is to pull the design down from the Brother canvas that's kind of waiting on standby there. And we have two buttons. We have pattern and scan, right, for the first menu. But these patterns right here are patterns that are inside of the machine when you bought it. What I want to do is hit the retrieve data button, and then it wants to know where do you want to retrieve data from. I can get it from the machine itself if I saved an external design in the machine. I can get it from the cloud, from a USB, or from my computer if I was cabled to my computer. I'm going to push the button for the cloud. It's retrieving, and there are all of my pieces that we just sent down here. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to put my fabrics on my mat approximately where they look like they are on the screen. So I have all of my fabrics on my mat approximately where I think they are on the screen. It doesn't have to be exact because I'm going to scan the mat to be able to take a picture of the fabrics. What I have done is I've got this on the turquoise or aqua colored low tack mat. I've got heat and bond side down, paper off, and pretty side of my fabric right side up. So I'm going to load the mat into the machine now. And I'm just going to hit the load button, which is the middle button. It looks like the mat here on the side. Okay, so right here in the middle, there is a row of 3 buttons, and that middle box, this middle box right here is the scan button, and this will scan the mat and take a picture of the fabric that is on the mat. So I'm going to just touch the button, and I'm going to tell it start. And it's going to pull the mat in. Okay, so now you can see I did a pretty good job of guesstimating where to put all of that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just touch these and then Sometimes you can use your pen and just manipulate it a little bit and move it. Sometimes it'll move too much. And if it does, you can touch this crosshair right here, and that will give you some jog buttons that you can use that move it just little micro increments. And sometimes that's a little bit more accurate. So let me go with this one. You can move it like that. That looks pretty good. Okay, I think this is fine. I think everything's going to cut out just fine. So I'm going to tell it okay. And it says please select. And I'm going to hit cut. And start. I want to show you the process that I use to take the block out of the hoop and to get it ready to go into the final project. Can you guys stand this? Oh, this is too cute for words. My goodness. So on these magnetic hoops, you just pop them apart. And because I've already got all of my stabilizer already cut, I just go ahead and put another one in the hoop, and it's hooped and it's ready to go back into the machine now. I use a tool, it's a ruler, and it is called a trimmer by George. I want to show you this. This is the trimmer by George. Now you don't have to do this, but the pattern calls for you to remove the excess stabilizer from the back of the block. And the easiest way to do that is to use this trimmer by George. The trimmer by George has a metal lip. This is trimmer by George 3.0. If you have the original trimmer by George or the trimmer by George 2.0, this one is no different. They just ran out of 2.0 and had to get another one made. This one only goes to 4.5, but it is more than sufficient for what you need for this project. Along the bottom edge, there is a dotted 1/2 inch line. And the unique thing about this trimmer is it is designed to remove either batting or stabilizer or both from a project and precisely cut it all up even with the size of the block that you need. So this lip right here provides a protective barrier to the project itself. And let me show you what I mean by that. It says right here, 60 millimeter rotary cutter required. And you're going to need the big 60 millimeter rotary cutter. And the reason for that is the buttons in the middle of the blades on the smaller 45 millimeter rotary cutters, they prevent the blade from getting down far enough, and you won't get a good cut and you'll be frustrated with it. But these, the button is up high enough. See how much more blade is below the edge of the trimmer? That's why you need the larger rotary cutter in order to be able to use this tool. So the first thing that I have been doing is I will go ahead and flip the fabric up out of the way. Let me put you on this side so you can see what I'm doing. So I flipped up the fabric. This is the seam right here, and here is the stabilizer. And I'm just going to push it, the edge, pushing the metal lip up against the edge of the fabric. And I will start behind it and push and slide it up and do this. Now I'm doing the top and bottom edges of the project first because I'm keeping all of these to sew them together so I can reuse them in other projects. So then flip the fabric back over. When you turn the ruler over, the numbers are correct to you looking at it from this side. If you look at it from you don't need the numbers on this side because this side uses the metal edge. This side uses the numbers on the ruler, or the markings on the ruler. So now I'm going to line up my 1/2 inch seam allowance with that dotted line and trim that. Okay, now I'm going to do the other side, and you just flip up the fabric and slide it along. If you don't have a trimmer by George, you can take your curved scissors and just lift up the stabilizer and get this and cut. This is how you'll do it if you don't have a trimmer by George. Okay? But I have one. So, a rotary mat's handy too if you want to use that. I'm just keeping my work surface clean here. Just lift this up, slide it in against the stitch line, cut, flip it over, and trim my 1/2 inch seam allowance for the block. There we go. It's all trimmed up, and all of the stabilizer has been removed, snugged up right close to that stitch line, and it's just wonderful. It makes a perfect trimmed up block. So this is ready to go. I've finished this one. This is block number 13. So I'm gonna put a 13 on here just so I know which one's next, and then I'm gonna mark off block 13 on my little block tracker.